of the things we talked about last week was this issue of optimizing for early adopters and visionaries and making it an explicit goal to understand what their needs are. And I just really want to highlight the importance of this rather than defaulting to this idea of co-creation, which I think is really rampant when we don't know what else to do. We sort of decide we're going to co-create without knowing exactly what that means or how to do that effectively. And what I really just want to emphasize is that when we approach folks from a place of service and posit to them, propose to them, I'd like you to help me build and co-create this thing. This will likely catalyze, for the right people, a level of excitement for a couple of weeks, but it will not, and sort of by default should not, pull them in the same way that proposing something really tangible, driven by your leadership, that only you can really provide, such as, do you want a scalable coaching business built on flow and monthly recurring revenue? Because nobody else is really doing that, at least within the heroic space. There's sort of a distinction there. There's a higher level of sophistication. And I sort of believe that heroic doesn't teach this model simply because, as you've seen, it requires a lot of mentoring and sort of editing line by line and things of that nature, that I don't believe they have the staff to, sort of maintain a program like that. So it's much easier for them to recommend this referral system that doesn't require that level of intervention on behalf of the staff at their, sort of current operational level, which is okay. But knowing that you haven't necessarily made the distinction of, for example, build a flow-based thing based on monthly recurring revenue, knowing your offer doesn't have that level of distinction and sophistication yet, I just kind of want to backtrack to the original premise where this program started, which was the mental fitness revolution. And the value proposition there was how you can leverage flow to express your vision boldly, even if you're the type of person who historically has had anxiety and depression get in the way, right? At no point did I frame that up as collaboration or co-creation, and for a really important reason that I just really want to highlight and share with you, because I think it's important to be mindful of. And that's when we seek to co-create and collaborate from a place of relatively low mass, low gravity within ourselves, low ability to handle and maintain intensity. It becomes about them helping us meet our need to develop this thing. So we talked about this idea of developing mass, holding intensity, right? You can obviously harness collaboration once you have developed a degree of mass, gravity, intensity, precision, etc. It's really hard to co-create and collaborate without these things in place. As you guys know, I come from a therapeutic background, so I have this tendency to apply psychological concepts to things that aren't normally thought of in psychological terms. But to me, when we create, co-create, collaborate from a place of lacking that mass, lacking that our own ability to maintain intensity and deal with the anxiety that arises as we try to connect with and then hold that intensity. When we do that, ultimately, it will feel good for your participants initially, as codependency does. It always feels good to start, right? Just how we end up getting into these little loops. But even past those couple of weeks, we really shouldn't be asking or expecting or hoping that somebody is going to pay for a relationship that has a level of codependence. So we want to make sure that we have really strong mechanisms in place to intervene when we feel that impulse to step backwards from leadership as a strategy to deal with anxiety, which is super common. So how does this show up in practical terms? One of the things is another aspect of content creation, outreach has been the issue of audience polarization, right? This is a really good example of when we might fall backwards out of leadership because of anxiety. So I can remember in my own experience this fear of alienating the audience, whatever that might be for me. And I know I've said this a couple of times, but I was never at risk of that, and neither are any of you. And actually, by design, we are seeking to repel 10 to 20% of whoever it is that is actually watching right now. That's actually a goal. So along those lines, when you have folks who are super interested and have developed an understanding that what you have created is the thing that they need, there's still the risk that you can alienate them, for example, by emailing 3 times a day and creating redundant offers and asking them to pay for them, right? That's definitely true. I do also want to point out, though, even if you somehow found yourself in this situation, which again, you guys are not close to being in, for the people who have understood how you can help them, there's going to be still a level of tolerance. And I'm not saying you should use that, but just be aware that it's true. They will still have a level of tolerance for what you're doing. And this kind of sort of speaks to what we talked about last week, spammy emailing. I just got to know you, but would you like to pay me $10,000 to come to wherever? You know, a program that feels like repackaged from the other thing that you just bought. For the people who are truly invested, there is still a level of tolerance. So I just want to really make that clear. So I'm trying to make this really bold and dramatic. The big risk for each of you is not this alienation, but folks having no clue what you're about. And so by definition, they can't engage. The other thing I want to mention, and this is sort of related and sort of disconnected, but as you're thinking into the future with the offer that you currently have and what that's going to look like in 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 years, what's been really helpful for me is to think about lifetime value rather than trying to manage tightly what it costs weekly or even monthly or anything like that. I want to create low resistance entry points for folks. And I want to give you guys a permission slip to start thinking like this. And so I'll be really direct. It is my hope that you will be here on some type of thing, whatever that looks like in our AI augmented changed world in 10 years, still finding something useful, right? Obviously, I know that not everyone will be, but that is the direction I'm shooting. So how can you wrap your mind around the reality that to reduce in order to reduce friction, to increase flow, to reduce churn, to reduce repeated selling situations, we have to be effective at helping somebody over the long term. The problems that you have today, or that your clients have today, are not going to be the same problems they have in 10 years, obviously. But what I hope you will be committed to developing in your thinking, and what I am committed to really hope projecting into your minds, is this idea of earnestly, joyfully, and effectively evolving as your clients have success and then have bigger and more interesting problems coming up. So I just want to give like a really extended timeline for Resonance Revolution so that you guys can start to conceptualize, not writing it in stone, but how you start creating solutions for the new problems that emerge as somebody has success with your initial solution. So everything, initial phases, was outlined in that roadmap. 3 phases, kind of your foundation, your data analyzation, and then your scaling. Over the medium term, some of the things that I'm actively developing, pursuing at this point, and I mentioned this, I believe, at least to Casey, is this idea of psychedelic-assisted business growth identity reformulation. And so obviously this is a little polarizing, and it would never be required for anybody to join. It would be a separate area of the ecosystem. But you guys may have come across this idea of, and I hate the way that this is framed, but the stoned aped theory, which is that the introduction of plant medicine into the diet of prehistoric people was the sort of impetus for rapid change in brain development. And I personally feel, and have felt for at least 20 years, a very intense level of urgency to bring all solutions to bear, at least solutions that I'm capable of operating to bear in service of the world's problems. So that's why that is something I'm developing towards. We've talked a lot about AI. I won't go too into why. It's just my simple belief. I was thinking, I can't find a single expert who says that don't worry about AI, right? Nobody is saying that at the expert level. And so my conclusion is that if you don't have this integrated, the business won't survive in the long term. So putting in place all of the resources that would be needed to help people integrate AI into their coaching to whatever degree makes sense for the people they work with. Automation to keep everybody in flow. So where this is going is N8N templates for automations, the Go high level snapshots, things like that. And I don't know if I've ever really made this clear, but just so you guys are aware, all of your initial email sequences, landing pages, and workflows, when you are ready to move beyond one-on-one outreach for your program, are already built and basically ready for you to kind of make your own and then turn them on. So I just want you to know that. So the automations that I'm talking about here are a little more complex than that. This would be using AI agents to connect your Facebook to your Go high level to your ChatGPT. So you're basically going across platforms at that point to try to create higher degrees of leverage. So I also don't talk a lot about math. but just want to illuminate this because it for me has been really helpful to think in these terms. If and when you have the offer that's selling, and you also simultaneously have this sensation of this is it, this is where I want to stabilize and expand, that's when you scale it. So as you know, I went through 2 iterations before I tipped into that sensation of this is it. But I did make money through the entirety, which is what allowed me to get to a place where I actually wanted to stabilize. When I say wanted and kind of tried to highlight, italicize that, because if you don't have the option to choose where you stabilize, you're going to be functioning from that kind of scarcity, I have to mentality, which will lead you to scaling something that feels prison-y and has a lot of problems that you would prefer to actually not have, but through the scaling process, you would just sort of exponentialize those problems. So with those initial 2 offers, the way they were working, the way people were buying them and engaging with them, they were scalable, but for me, they had still different pieces that felt prison-y. Specifically, what I didn't like about it was the sensation of we were meeting 5 days a week, and I sort of got the impression that folks were using calls to avoid doing work, right? So I did not feel good about that, and I did not want to grow that sensation. I also didn't really I felt a very strong connection with some folks in the group and in their enthusiasm and what they wanted next. But then there were the other half or so that didn't have that. So I wanted to make sure that I was bringing in more of that first category first. I think you'll have fewer issues striking the note that you need because I'm in there kind of helping you fine tune some of that. But all of this is to say, reaching a point of stabilization. If I were to get 61 people into this program, it would be a $250,000 revenue business, right? When you have reached the point of stabilization, where it's like, this is it, it's going to be really obvious to you that you could definitely find 60 people who would not only want this thing, but would be able to buy this thing. So your scaling process is how you find those people, right? This is all predicated on your willingness, established prior, to go through that 10 to 20% polarization process. The other thing I want to mention is it's not the easiest thing to grow a coaching business. It's not the hardest thing either, as we've talked about, but I was curious if anyone experienced this, and this being this sensation of being a little bit ahead of the curve, anticipating problems that nobody else quite sees yet. Perhaps 10 years ago, being worried about something that nobody else thought was concerning, and now everybody is really concerned about it. If you have that working for you, which frankly has been a huge problem for me, the opportunity, I think, in coaching is that you get to be that you get to versus have to, in my opinion, is a little overused, but literally you get to be on the leading edge of the thing that you care about the most. But in order to be in that space and hold that intensity, you have to be able to accept that mission with all of the complexity, all of the frighteningness, and all of the uncertainty that's implied. But I just want to really highlight the what is for me a huge opportunity to take what has been a real problem for me, truly, and be on the leading edge of solving it. What this means is that if you don't believe in what you're doing, no one else is going to. Part of that has to do with just how humans are. Part of it has to do with the fact that you're also doing this in a world with so much noise that it's not even calculable how much noise there is. But what people are coming for is that sensation of insight and then into action, solving the real problems, and then being able to connect the dots retrospectively. They're coming for that sense of power that gives them. And if you aren't able to project that for them to hold that confidence that they can borrow upon, it's a really questionable road trying to grow the coaching business from that stance, because it is a large mountain, if you will. So I feel like I dropped a lot of sort of intense points here, but I'm feel pretty strongly that each of you does have a desire to take all of the things, namely what brought us together, heroic principles, apply these ferociously in this particular context. So I'm just hoping that that's true, and I want to also enhance it in you, because I know it is hard. I really do. I hope that however I communicate about this doesn't ever understate that I know that this is hard. But if you've already decided on some level, which I think you did months ago at this point, that the models that are being proposed for you generally are not going to work for you, and that you really do have to take these things off the bumper sticker. If you've already made that decision a couple months ago, I just really want to bring you back to it, because that's a powerful thing. There are a lot of people with a lot of bumper stickers. And that's okay. We are not superior, but we have decided that for us to truly model and then extrapolate these ideas into our community is a priority. So I just really want to bring that back to the forefront, create that enthusiasm, also the joy and the fun that's involved as you get to, I'm saying that I find it annoying when people say, I don't I get to do this. I don't have to. Like, for me, it feels a little, but there is truth to it, right? And I think the key distinction, which makes that differentiates between whether that is sort of subjugating yourself or empowering yourself, is whether or not you have a sense of true, genuine enthusiasm and fun when you think about the get to.